Yeah, g'day. So my name's Andy, for those of you that don't know me. Despite my silly accent, which you might have picked up, I have lived here in Europe for the last 33 years. And yeah, I have worked for places like Amazon and Dell and a number of startup businesses which I've helped take to scale for US investors. Great to see so many people downstairs. It's very busy down there today, and I'm absolutely bowled over with just the enthusiasm with which people are happy to come out and meet people face to face again. It's really good. For too long we've been talking to each other across a Zoom link, so I'm just mesmerised by seeing you all in person. You all look wonderful. So I'm going to talk to you today about the impact of cloud on the virtual desktop industry. So some of you may be familiar with VDI. Show of hands, everyone know what VDI is? Yeah, cool. We had a chap on the stand earlier that said to us, "Is that Citrix?" I said, "That's inappropriate, you shouldn't say that." But there are some legacy vendors in that space, Citrix and VMware Horizon, obviously. But let's talk first about cloud. So, excuse me. How many people would say they have a cloud-first strategy, or that cloud is significantly impacting their strategy today? Okay, yeah, that's probably about half of you. That surprised me. I thought it'd be more than that. Cloud is changing the way that we consume technology. Gartner tells us that most enterprises will be out of their data centers, or substantially out of their data centers, by the end of the decade, saving substantial amounts of CO2, saving substantial amounts of money. So that change really has a lot of momentum now. And I think on top of that, the way people are working has also changed post the pandemic. So we're seeing a very big impact not only on the data center, preferences of moving away from infrastructure that we own, that we pay for whether we're using it or not, to infrastructure that we consume as we need it. You need more, we pay more; we need less, we pay less. So that's the software as a service model, where I don't expect to pay for my stuff just to sit there and wait. I expect to pay for what I'm using, what's driving productivity in my business. And this change has had an impact not only on CIOs and how people plan their IT strategy, it's had an impact on vendors too. It's very difficult for some of the traditional vendors, many of which I've worked for over the years, to make that change not only to technology and where the technology can live, but in terms of their business models and how they expect to get paid. So there's a bit of a conflict there that comes up. So customers are often asking themselves, how will we evolve as this market is changing? As vendors who were strong yesterday are not as well positioned for tomorrow. I can't typically just stay with what I used to do. And as I want to take advantage post the pandemic of the things that I need more in terms of global reach, agility, flexibility, and so forth. Where will I go to next? So what we would call the do-it-yourself VDI market has had its day. Post the pandemic, there's more demand than ever because people want to work from anywhere. People want to bring their own devices. People want to collaborate with third parties because they need resource short term. Maybe they've outsourced some of that stuff to contractors in the Far East or to BPO operators perhaps closer to home. So there's more demand for remote access to resources that help me get my business processes done. And there's a greater focus on security. I have even more reason to protect the intellectual property that I'm using to do my business without having my third-party staff maybe save that, copy-paste that, etc. So these businesses, such as VMware Horizon and Citrix, they really should be booming, but they just didn't keep up with this transition to the cloud. What we've seen is that Citrix have lost 1 in 4 staff. We've seen that all of the leadership have left. That includes the CEO. More on him in a minute because he's working with us now. And equally, VMware has been acquired by Broadcom, a chip manufacturer. There was a Gartner survey out about 3 weeks ago, which indicates that 56% of Gartner customers are wondering and worrying about what's going to happen. Are their prices going to go up? Is their service going to go down? The people that they used to deal with, how is that going to change? So this is a symptom of the tidal wave of change that cloud is rolling through this industry right now. In addition to that, The do-it-yourself approach to virtual desktops, constrained in my own data center, is the most expensive way to move to cloud. I could lift and shift that infrastructure into the cloud, but that will cost me a lot, and it will inherit a lot of the constraints that it has running in one place today. And of course, when I go to the cloud, I pretty much want to be able to have the flexibility to have people working anywhere and everywhere and on demand. And I don't want to pay for what I'm not using when I'm not using it. So, as I said, the need for desktops and workstations that are available anywhere has really never been greater. And that is driven by work from anywhere, remote working, and mergers and acquisitions, which are happening at a much faster pace as the world is going through quite a lot of disruption and change. We're dealing with a financial institution in Vienna this week. We've just deployed for them because they've done a couple of acquisitions, suddenly 450 new staff. And have you tried ordering physical hardware lately? There are big disruptions to supply chains. It can take months and months to get what you want, whether it's stuff in a rack or whether it's desktops, laptops, workstations, that sort of thing. So the need to be able to do this stuff on demand has also never been greater than it has before. And we are heading into very uncertain economic times. The Bank of England last week said that we're heading for a, what was the words they used? It was pretty doom-laden, a deep recession for at least 2 years. So I can envisage that I'm thinking twice about capital investments that are going to mean that I might have over-provisioned, or through the winds of change, I might have under-provisioned. So I need that agility more than ever. Turn the flame up, turn the flame down if I need to manage my business risks that way. But if you are already using something like Citrix or VMware Horizon, well, why not? Why not just lift and shift that to the cloud? I don't know if you know how this stuff works. I did used to be IT director of a global bank, but that's a long time ago, back in the late 90s. So I have a vague memory of how this stuff works because we deployed it. But there's things like, oh gosh, that's the wrong button, isn't it? There we go. I thought that might have been the pointer. I'm going to skip that. There's things like databases, SQL servers, brokers, application servers, network infrastructure, etc., etc., etc. Now, it's one thing for me to have all of that sitting in my own data center, ticking away doing nothing when I'm not using it. But if I move that to the cloud, that infrastructure as a service, I'm going to get line item after line item after line item of bill before I've even put a single user in there. And plus this stuff, it's just so complex. I've probably spent a long time, if I've had this stuff in place for decades, figuring out how to support it and manage it. I might have people on my staff or a third party like Wipro, Infosys, HCL, Capgemini or whoever who's figured out how to run that for me. But now I'm going to move that into a new environment in the cloud. Do I have the skills and resources to manage that? Is going to be the next question. So that complexity drives a few challenges. Do-it-yourself VDI, what we mean by that is the customer has to manage all of those components for the privilege of creating some virtual desktops. As we just touched on, you could lift and shift it to the cloud, but even after that migration, that infrastructure will still be complex to manage, to operate, to troubleshoot, and you know what else? It'll still be in one place. Just moving something from my basement to Amazon's basement, or Azure or GCP, doesn't really change the nature of the beast. And these monolithic desktop infrastructures are governed by latency. How far is the user from where that infrastructure is? Because the laws of physics are fixed. The world is large, the speed of light is constant. If I'm far away because I'm taking on some contractors or BPO in the Far East or even in Eastern Europe, they're going to move their mouse across the screen to try and update some form or drag and drop something or whatever, and their cursor is going to follow a little while later, and they'll not thank you for it. And that performance issue is going to be the same if I've not moved to the cloud in a way which lets me take advantage of the global nature of the cloud. So just to wrap up this first bit, it's going to cost you a ton of dosh to migrate it and to operate it, and for the infrastructure as a service costs in the cloud that let it run before you've put even a single user on there. So let me tell you where we're coming from. So Workspot's a company which has been born in Citrix. In fact, a long time ago, 6 or 7 years ago, the team here on the left who used to run the Citrix Zen business. Amitabh Sinha, our CEO, was the GM of the Citrix Zen division. They approached this bloke at the top here, Mark Templeton, and they said, mate, if we're going to do, I don't know if they used the word mate, but they said, if we're going to do virtual desktops in the cloud, cloud is coming, cloud is going to be the de facto platform for more and more enterprises in the world. And we see that more and more data storage, applications, workloads have moved into the cloud. So I want my desktops to be near that. So if that's going to happen, we can't just use this infrastructure that we've already designed. We have to reinvent this using the modern techniques, the microservices, the cloud architectures, the message buses, all the rest of it, so that we can present a different consumption model, a different business model, so that people can consume their desktops, their workstations by the hour or by the month or whatever it is that they need, so that they can flex up and flex down and have them anywhere in the world. And Mark said, great idea, boys, but honestly, it's maybe a bit of a distraction for us right now. At that time, they were doing about $250 million a quarter at Citrix. They're not now. So at the time, they said, right, screw it, we'll head off and we'll get some VC money and we'll do this ourselves. We were the first to market with cloud PCs back in 2017. And we've since partnered with Microsoft Azure, with Google GCP, and now also with AWS to deliver that. And since then also, Citrix has shrunk, gone private. Most of the staff have left, the leadership certainly, and Mark is the chairman of our business now. So that's just a bit about where we've come from. We sort of know what we're doing with VDI. And this is what we deliver. So what users get is something which looks just like the workstation they're familiar with now. But they can use that anywhere and on any device. And it can be a low-cost, cheap device. Increasingly, people want to reuse old hardware, sweat assets for longer, save themselves a ton of CO2 and avoid buying new desktops and laptops every 3 or 4 years. So if I'm able to take advantage of the power that's in the cloud with GPUs and CPUs that I can turn up or turn down on demand, as much memory as I need, with direct connection to the fastest networks on earth, in Google's case, where all the data and applications are, it's going to perform better than the desktop that they had before, and they're going to be able to do all of that stuff that they used to do in terms of, in this case, 3D CAD. I think this is AutoCAD Revit. And importantly, it can be available anywhere. I've just taken on those contractors on the other side of the world. I've just done an acquisition in the Middle East. And of course, the cloud, the hyperscalers that we work with, obviously Google GCP, Azure and AWS, they have regions everywhere. Part of our architecture, which I won't do justice to here, you can scan these cards and get the demo and get a prize for registering with us for the demo. But we'll show you that we've got a separation between what's called the control plane and the data plane. And part of what that means is that we can spin up these workstations on demand. You can do tens of thousands of them in minutes anywhere in the world, but you manage it just like it was all in your own data center. So that's a big simplification of your management processes there as well. So that's to give you a little bit of a glimpse into what it looks like that we deliver. It just looks like any other workstation, but it's running with the power of the cloud, and I don't have to spend so much money on my devices. I could be using my own devices. I could be letting engineers that I've hired work in the south of France using an iPad if I wanted to. And that's going to give me some more flexibility in the current market environments. So we deliver things like Windows 10 or Windows 11 desktop OS. We are, outside of Azure, the only way of delivering Windows 10 desktop OS in cloud platforms like GCP, Google Cloud Platform, because there are Microsoft license restrictions on that, but we use the Google sole tenant nodes, which are allowed to license Microsoft desktop OS. And that's important because lots of applications, especially those CAD and engineering applications, but also things like the lady in accounts who's been using an Access database that no one can even remember who wrote it, well, that'll probably need the Windows desktop DLLs that it expects as well. We can deliver fast GPU workstations. People use this for PC disaster recovery, for all kinds of use cases, secure remote working, mergers and acquisitions, zero trust security environments where I can trust any device on the far end. Increasingly, people are moving away from things like Microsoft Office Suite and adopting Google Cloud. Used to be called G Suite. These days they call it Google Workspace. And that's wonderful, and I can save myself a lot of time, and I can get myself a lot of efficiency and reduce my costs that way. But very often there's still going to be a set of applications that are legacy and require that Windows operating system environment, which I would like to present as just another tab in their Chrome browser, for example. Very often in finance, people have put a lot of time and effort into developing Excel macros, for example, and are over their dead body going to rewrite them in another environment, right? So rather than have the rollout of modern Web 2.0, PWA, progressive web applications, rather than have that rollout stall because Thelma in accounts wants to use her Excel, you can just present the same stuff alongside that, but also from the cloud, which I think gives you a number of pretty good advantages for remote employees, contractors, 3D CAD engineers, etc., different personas. Let's have a think about the advantages or disadvantages of physical PC workstations. Well, they can give you excellent performance to an extent because the disk, the memory, the CPU are all right there in front of you. But increasingly, people aren't in the same building as the data center. Increasingly, people are on the end of a DSL line in the Outer Hebrides or in the south of France or in the suburbs of Edinburgh. And so now I've got a new problem, which is that 3D model that I'm downloading to do some work with, that software package that I need to do my iterative testing on, that piece of work that I need to do in my PowerPoint or whatever, it's got to bring the files down first and then save them back. And that slows collaboration between people as well. Much better if that could actually be on the backbone itself. But can't deny, a workstation in front of me is generally a fast thing. But supply chain issues, it's going to take me a long time to get hold of them, especially if I just did an acquisition. I've got a whole new bunch of people that I need to provision. Endpoint security has become a really big focus for everybody. We see state actors as well as criminal actors taking pot shots at just about every business around. And of course, it's hard for me to keep those devices, which can be left on trains, which can be stolen from people's homes. One of our customers, an NHS trust down in Hereford and Worcester, their biggest risk actually is theft. They have public environments hospitals. People steal the devices. So how am I going to keep data private if it can be physically shifted away? So that's another disadvantage these days. So people throw money at the problem by making sure there's keystroke scanners and antivirus and all sorts of agents so that, again, maybe someone from Wipro or Infosys can manage those environments and desktops for them and keep them patched and keep them revved, and all of that costs time and money. And then at the end of every 3 or 4 years, I'll probably just throw it away and buy another one and go through another procurement cycle and cause the world more waste and also more energy consumed in building those laptops, etc., in the first place. All of this is operationally complex, especially in this post-pandemic world. So now a lot of people who didn't have virtual desktops in the past are saying to themselves, well, actually, maybe I need them now, but I don't want to have to build that infrastructure. Is there a way that I can just get these things on demand? And there is. And is there a way I can do it across different cloud vendors? Because I don't want to be locked into one cloud vendor or the other. I have workloads running in both or all three of them through M&A or just through my personal choice. And frankly, I don't want to be painted into a corner. So if I do go down the path of deploying this kind of technology in the cloud, how will these things be different? Well, they can be made available anywhere in minutes. Not kidding. We can demo that for you. But that's just a world away from having to take weeks and weeks to provision stuff. Lots of businesses now, small and large, have realized that the data center class security that the cloud vendors can provide, not only with all their physical resource, with their human resource, with their skills, with their technology, can actually be much more secure environments than many businesses are able to deliver for themselves. On top of that, these things can be instantly reconfigurable. If I buy all of the people in this room a high-spec laptop or workstation today with some fancy GPU in it, maybe a year from now, there's a better, faster, cheaper GPU for that device. and I would really like to use it. Well, tough. Just wait until you get a new device in another 3 years, guys. As opposed to in the cloud, I can click a button when I've got that user saying, I just need more performance because this new work that we're doing on this, one of our customers, Taka Oil and Gas, Taka Brittany, doing Petrel seismic analysis, they want to get more done at once. Click a button, there's more resource for that user and that user and that user. And I didn't have to buy something new. I just had the flexibility, the agility to do that directly in the cloud. So this model is not only simpler to deploy and scale and operate than physical PCs, we're going to get better performance than those physical PCs because now, as I say, that workload is on the same network, the same bus, if you like, as the cloud data sources, as their colleagues, as where all the other applications increasingly are. So just an idea as to how this works with the separation of the control plane and the data plane. The control plane means that without having to deploy any infrastructure, you can send us commands effectively, and we will make the infrastructure happen behind the scenes in any one of the clouds or in any hypervisor environment. For some customers, that means also doing it on-prem. In fact, we do have customers who require us to spin some stuff up on-prem because of some stuff that they just don't want to leave their environment at all. And you can do a mixture of those things. The data plane is much lower latency. That means higher performance for two reasons. One is the ease with which we can make a machine available near a user who's in Budapest, or because there's a new data center in Linz, just across the river in Austria, or the ease with which we can make another machine available in the same network, using the same applications, to a user in the Far East. If I tried to do that with my traditional VDI, I would have to replicate that infrastructure. That's a year-long project that costs a fortune. But by separating that, I'm going to have the machines close to where the users are. Proximity with VDI means performance. In an increasingly fractured global world, a very unstable and uncertain world at the moment, that's very valuable. The other thing that drives performance here is that the control plane is not in the data path. That means we'll get more work out of the GPUs, etc., without having to slow them down. It's a technical point which we can do more justice to in a demo. So this is a lady called Rebecca Yu. She works at one of our architecture, engineering, construction businesses, customers, I should say. She's using Autodesk Revit there. They're doing like ray tracing and modeling and trying to show clients how that environment's going to look. By the way, you don't have to use this stuff with CAD and engineering. It gives us sexier pictures to show than some banker's form-filling application, but all the same things apply. But as opposed to what they had before when they were going on site and working with clients and waiting for the file to download and someone in headquarters had changed the model and they're out of sync, etc. Now, that stuff's on the same network in Azure or in Google as her colleagues, and so the changes are happening straight away. She has access to unlimited file storage because that storage is in the cloud. She has access to all the other applications that her business uses because it's directly attached to that backbone. A couple of quick customer examples, and then I'm just about done, and there's time for questions at the end. So some of you might know Taka Brittany. They're out of Abu Dhabi, but they have a bigger, sizable operation up here in Aberdeen. So they're doing subsea geology and geophysics. And if anyone's connected with oil and gas, you'll probably know the Schlumberger Petrel application. And it's an absolute bastard in terms of its demand for CPU and memory and GPU. Essentially, 3D models of the subsurface, and we like to have a look and see where we might drill next, that type of thing. They needed GPU-powered cloud PC workstations because they wanted to avoid just the cost of replacing those machines, and they didn't want to lock themselves in to this year's model of hardware, knowing that next year they might have a better choice or a different choice. And frankly, with the volatility, and that's the most volatile industry on earth, the prices are up very high just now. We've also seen the other side of that cycle again and again. They need flexibility in their allocation of human resource as well. That might mean using more contractors today. That might mean having less staff tomorrow. And I don't want to be stuck with physical infrastructure as my business goes through those huge pendulum swings in that industry. Linklaters, a law firm. Their key application is document management. It's not rocket science. They type stuff. But it's very important that they can access all of those records from previous cases, from previous transactions with the same customers, clients, I should say, etc. They had Citrix on-prem, but you know what? They lost access to it in a flood. So the driver here was, would this be more resilient if I had this in the cloud? Where every cloud vendor now, a region consists of multiple data centers in an urban area and can be replicated elsewhere. They don't want to be in the business of throwing more money at their infrastructure. They just want something which is going to be more resilient in the event of a man-made or otherwise disaster. So they started with us for that, but they found it was very efficient. So now they're using us for all of their remote offices and their work from anywhere, which is obviously what happened in the pandemic as well. And this last one, I don't know if you guys have heard of Volocopter. Anyone heard of it? Oh, a couple of you have. That's awesome. I love this company. We were down there a week before last. They're down in Baden-Württemberg. They've been a customer of ours for a couple of years now. They've got a big digital clock on the wall which is counting down to Paris 24. My French isn't very good. Everyone get that? That's Paris 24. That's the Olympics coming up. Why? Because this is like a human-scale drone. It has 2 to 3 passengers in it, none of which are pilots. I happen to be a pilot, interested in aviation, talk to me later. But for this urban taxi scheme to work, you want to click an app and be taken over to where you need to be. So, yeah, I know, it sounds bizarre, doesn't it? But it's going to work. People are going to get from the airport in Edinburgh into town this way within a decade. You mark my words. So they are going to do their launch at Paris 24. That's going to have a lot of eyes on it. It's their key marketing event. So can you bet there's some sweat running through the veins of those engineers? Sweat doesn't run through veins, but you know what I mean, about hitting that deadline. What are their challenges besides the technical and regulatory and approval cycle challenges for that project? One of their challenges is the war for talent. It is hard for these German Mittelstand companies, which are based in a local or even rural area, that are usually excellent at one thing and usually world-beating at it. It's hard for a lot of these businesses to recruit and retain engineers in the current environment post-pandemic when people have learned they can go and live in Portugal if they want. So they need remote working, for one. Secondly, even that's not enough. They've just taken on an extra 50 engineers from Lufthansa Services up in Hamburg. Well, Hamburg is about 6 hours by train from Baden-Württemberg. So if they're going to use those external contractors, those same Lufthansa Services folks are also doing work on an Airbus subsidiary, which is, by the way, in the same game. So they're a little concerned about their IP. So it's important for them not only that they can provide those workstations, but through things that we do like posture checking and security policies, that they can restrict and control who can and can't copy-paste data out of that virtual environment, save it onto a local USB, print it, copy it to another application on their local machine, or not. Obviously not if it's an external contractor. So I just want to give you some idea of the sort of people who are using this. Lastly, people are increasingly turning to us now because of concerns about ransomware recovery. Now, ransomware affects many things. We're not here to recover your files. You'll need solutions for that. We're not here to recover your applications either. However, people lose their access to their desktop environment, either because the machines have had stuff on the machines encrypted, and increasingly the bigger threat is that the Active Directory, the AD, gets encrypted and you've lost access. So we have big global corporations whose names I'm not allowed to say, some of whom make aeroplanes, using our technology now to have an isolated environment separate from their normal physical operations in the cloud. They don't want to pay for that whole shadow infrastructure to be there all the time. They want an insurance policy. So because I mentioned before, we can spin up tens of thousands, I'm not kidding, of machines just like that. We might not have the resource for that. The Google data center down the road might not, but you know, the one in Northern Europe might, if it's not near me, and the AWS data center down the road from that might. And if I can bring all that together quickly, which we can, then I'll have guaranteed capacity, be able to have that facility back in an hour, and a simplified user experience. The aerospace manufacturer I'm talking about will tell its staff, go home, take this URL, go onto your kid's iPad or something, and you will then authenticate and you will find your workstation with your applications. Now, some of the applications that connects to in the data center might not be up yet, but just give us time and it will be. Meanwhile, send your physical machine away to be re-imaged. they have a process with one of the big Indian firms that takes 6 weeks to re-image the machines. There's a lot of people in this company. So how are they going to work in the meantime? This is how they're going to work in the meantime. So I could bore you with lots of technical stuff about the rich nature of the environment and all of the data you can get about how it works, and I could talk you through the control plane and the architecture, but I'm not qualified to do that. So I'm also not qualified to show you the fantastic interface in the control, Workspot control, which lets you control who can copy paste stuff and other stuff like that. There's a bloke downstairs who can, or we can do it online for you. So this is where I'll wrap up. Lifting and shifting VDI is the most complex and expensive way to move desktops to the cloud. It sucks and it's expensive. Cloud PC, desktops, workstations, can put you in control and deliver better performance and cost less. And come down and see us if you haven't already, and you can win a prize if you scan this QR code, and it's on the coasters on your seats as well. We're keen for you to come and do that with us, and we'll show you what we've got. So with that, I think there's a couple of minutes for questions. Otherwise, come and see me after the show. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you.
So I'm quite glad last time I had a VDI.
Yeah.
And get some antibiotics. But I'm glad you're talking about a different thing.
That's an STI, mate. An STI, yeah.
VDI as well. So not only Mike, if there's any questions for Andy, I'm kind of blown away because I think that thinking about ransomware attacks and stuff, and we had a significant attack in Scotland at SEPA a couple of Christmases ago. We've had something recently as well, which we can't talk about at the moment because it's still being investigated. But that is an ideal situation. I think that I'll be taking me back to base to look at for local authorities. But is there any questions from the floor? Any brave? Yes, thank you.
If it's technical, I'll refer you downstairs. give me a try.
It's not that technical. Eduardo from the University of Glasgow.
G'day.
Customers are actually able to mix and match between cloud providers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you saying, do customers want to?
Yes. For example, say the old AWS, all AWS service in a region are actually occupied.
Yeah.
Can I use GCP on the web?
Yeah. Yes. Certainly, with our technology, you can. So I speak as someone who used to work at AWS. And most of our team have worked at the various hyperscalers over time. Of course, from the point of view of one hyperscaler, you're going to pitch every possible service that you might ever need is right here, right now. Of course, there are subtle differences between them. So a lot of customers, it's true, do say, you know what, I'm just not going to skill up in all three of the hyperscalers. I'm going to do AWS, or I'm going to do Azure, or I'm going to do Google GCP. And that's, especially in mid-sized companies, that's extremely common. However, no one's CFO wants to be painted into a corner. So when it comes time for renewal of the enterprise discount program or whatever it is that you're doing with the vendor concerned, the commit, some of them call it, the enterprise agreement, some of them call it, you want to have a stronger negotiation position. If you've been developing everything that you do in one environment, you have a slightly weaker negotiation position because you're sort of locked in. At least with the desktop environment, and it's things like storage, which are commodity, etc. If you have the flexibility to move your platform in any direction, it's pretty easy. What I've seen people do is say, you know what, this next little M&A that we're doing, I'm just going to pop those over in GCP. Now come and talk to me about my renewal on my Azure Enterprise Agreement, for example. There's a third reason that people do it, and that is, and this would be much bigger, I'm talking about investment banks who I can't name, but US East Coast Investment Bank, who want to have belts and braces resilience in the event of a disaster. Who say, look, if I'm exposed to the risk of a region going down, small chance but like big risk for them, then I want to be able to transparently have the resource start up in another environment. And that is also part of what we do. Great question. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Return on investment?
Yeah, well, the big returns come from typically. I'll give you an example of a customer I'm working with down in the south of England at the moment. They have 6,000 desktop devices. They've decided that they're going to put in scope about 2,500 of those. They've identified that 1,000 of those devices, they only use browser-based applications. There's another 1,500 or so, we're working with Google Chrome on this one. There's another 1,500 or so of those devices which access 2 or 3 legacy Windows applications as they roll out to G Suite, etc. The return on investment for them is the hardware that they've been buying is much more powerful than it needs to be. And worse than that, they've been paying, in their case, I believe, Wipro, quite a premium for managing those devices. So that management cost and the physical cost of all the agents that run on those and keeping them secure and hard, that all goes away. So the TCO, or the ROI I should say, comes from that. Those costs simply vanish because I get to a point where I'm either using thin clients like something like iGel or Chromebooks or something like that, or frankly just sweating old assets and saying, you know what, I'm implementing a zero trust environment. I don't care about what's on that device anymore. If it runs, it runs. If it doesn't, put it in the bin. And that's a very big cost saving as well. Great question, thank you. All right, guys. Oh, one more, go ahead.
It's just looking at the SME market, because obviously, as you know, the UK and Scotland in particular are
Yeah.
massive in that. So
Yeah.
there's a price model for SME?
I'd say there'd probably need to be like at least 50 people using this before it would make sense, before it would cover our costs for the infrastructure that we set up underneath. That's a straight answer for you.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the sort of thing I was looking
Yeah.
at. Where are you pitching it in the
Yep.
SME market?
Yep. Most of our customers will have 200 or 300 users or more, but we've certainly got customers with around 50 seats. More so actually in architecture, engineering, construction, where the individual workstations probably have GPU and therefore cost more. The cost, by the way, of these devices depends on the spec. How many CPUs, how much memory, how many hours, weeks, days, months are you using them for, etc. Yeah. Good question. That's another coda to my ROI answer, by the way. If I've got an asset such as a workstation which is being used only part of the time, and I'm paying for it all of the time, well, obviously it's cheaper to run it part of the time. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate the questions. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.